For the next event, we travel to Barcelona, Spain, home of the Circuit de Catalunya racetrack. next event brings us to Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic and one of the most popular tourist spots in Europe.
Look very closely at this group and you will find the Audi Sport Quattro, a Ford and a Toyota. Otherwise, it's all Subaru Imprezas or Mitsubishi Evos. Literally thousands of them. Of course there are. This is the production rally group after all, and as we all know, only Subaru and Mitsubishi make rally cars. Or did make, at least. However, if you are over the age of 12, and before you all head off down the road in whichever vintage Impreza Evo takes your fancy, do take a steer in the Escort RS Cosworth. Because without the Ford, there would be no Evos and Impreza. The Cosy invented the concept of a car as hooligan. Think about it. Largely unsophisticated four-cylinder turbocharged engine? Check. Unjustified sense of invincibility inspiring four-wheel drive? Yes. Leery aerodynamic appendages? Oh yes. Not that you care, what with all those Imprezas and Evos to play with.
There are those among us who believe that small is better. That little something with the bulk engineered out of it must necessarily be more highly evolved. Phones, gadgets, television presenters. When it comes to cars, it should be relatively simple. Small cars have space only for small engines, and small engines, as we all know, means small power. However, small can also mean nimble. There is simply less of the car to change direction, so it can do so more quickly. But here's your chance to decide for yourself, with some small cars with enough power to make them a lot more than merely entertaining. The Fiesta ST is one of the very best, as befits a car that's competed on the World Rally Championship. As of course has the Citroën DS3, though the Citroën, like the Fiat Abarth 500 SS, clearly feels the need to tell the world that with some frankly silly graphics. What is it that makes all things small need to overcompensate with an unnecessarily showy appearance?
You can pretty much carbon date a chap, or for that matter the right kind of girl, by their hot hatch of choice. Like a first pin-up, a first LP, look that up if you're under the age of 30, or a first crush. Hot hatches are part of the fabric of us. Me, you, Clarkson, even May. Because it was okay to dream about hot hatches long before you were ever old enough to think about actually owning one. And it was okay to do that because we all might, if we worked hard at school, actually one day be able to afford one. So where are you going to start? Where hot hatches did with the VW Golf GTI, or its slightly chubbier but faster offspring, the Mark II GTI 16 valve. Then again, maybe Volkswagens aren't your thing. So there are Honda Civic Type Rs or a Renault Clio V6. But remember what I said. You can tell a lot about someone by the hot hatch that he or she craves.
Here we come to the hot hatch group, and never underestimate how important hot hatchbacks are. Back when they first appeared, they gave drivers hope. They showed that a sports car didn't have to be a rusty, leaky old Triumph or MG. It could be practical, convenient, and still amusing enough to give you cramp in your smile muscles. The hatches here are some of the best of the breed, starting with the excellent Ford Focus ST, which gives a textbook demonstration of how a hot hatch can be sensible every day, yet still give you kicks when you drive it like your trousers are on fire. Then there's the VW Scirocco R, technically a coupe, but it has a hatchback, and with 260 horsepower, it's definitely hot, so it's going in here. And if it's even half as likeable as the Mark I Scirocco I owned many years ago, then you'll want to marry it.
There was a time when simply going fast was all that was required of what we call sports cars. Not anymore, it seems. Today, a sports car needs to satisfy all our cravings, not just for speed, but for comfort, a sense of style, convenience, practicality, and above all, luxury. Would any of these cars be any worse for not being decorated with bits of dead animals and trees, or with offcuts from racing cars? I'm not so certain. BMW 3 Series you will see every day, not that it makes the M3 any less desirable, inside or out. While the Jaguar XKR S interior would not be out of place in an 18th century costume drama. But if rarity is in itself a luxury, try the Maserati Gran Turismo with its Ferrari-built V8, or the rare and underrated exercise in beating the Germans at their own game that is the Lexus ISF.
Any idiot can build a supercar. Find a giant engine, glue a load of carbon fibre to the outside, give it a silly name, and sell it for £1 million. No need to worry about boot space or comfort or whether the aircon works. But a car that's good to drive and that you can use every day, that's as challenging as building a fighter jet that's also easy to park in a multi-story. But when it goes right, well, you end up with something amazingly special. Something like the BMW M3, one of the very best fast cars of recent years. And don't forget Mazda's RX-7, the Toyota Supra, the original Skyline GTR, provided that is they haven't been improved by a spotty 17-year-old in a daft hat. These, I'm pleased to say, haven't.
These are the barroom crooners of the supercar world. Clothed in something approaching more like a classic tuxedo than something from the catwalk, and so just that little bit more everyday, but no less appealing for that. Even its name, California, tells you all you need to know about Ferrari's easy-driving car. This is a car in which to enjoy the sunshine, to spend rather more time enjoying the scenery passing by than counting down the meters to the next braking point. The AMG version of the Mercedes SLK and the BMW Z4 S-Drive have no rear seats, but do have engines of impeccable pedigree and rather nifty folding steel roofs. Not as rare as the Ferrari may be, but no less exciting. The Audi TT RS, meanwhile, is neither rare nor a convertible. It is, however, with its 2.5-litre, 5-cylinder Rally Quattro engine and 4-wheel drive, unquestionably exciting, but only when you want it to be. Which is what this group is all about. Muscle cars were once engineered to make ordinary cars go faster. Like men once went to the gym to make themselves go faster. These days, men who spend time in the gym and those shops where they sell milkshakes that make you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger are not doing it because they want to be better at sports, are they? They're doing it because they want their clothes to look too small for them. These muscle cars are more like modern muscle men, bulging in all the right places, but not necessarily any more sporting. The legendary Buick Regal GNX was at least NASCAR-derived and McLaren-engineered, but that didn't stop it having some interesting habits when driven hard. The 1993 Ford Mustang SVT Cobra, meanwhile, was a last-ditch attempt to bolt on some credibility and some speed to the generally forgettable third-generation Mustang. I'm not saying the cars are slow, they're not, or unexciting, they're not. It's just that, like that man with the power shake, they may be a bit embarrassing to be seen out with. If you've tried the motley collection of American muscle cars from the 1980s and 90s in the other group, fast but flawed cars developed to put a shine on otherwise forgettable models, you'll know by now that sometimes more power isn't always enough. The latest breed of muscle car proves, however, that thankfully it usually is. The 2007 Shelby GT500 produces exactly 500 brake horsepower and drives better than a car costing less than $50,000 has any right to. Remarkably, the Mustang has rivals, and two of them are here. The Chevy Camaro ZL1 with its 580 brake horsepower V8 and the Dodge Challenger SRT8 392 with its throwback cubic inches badge. In modern money, that's 6.4 litres. Drive them. Drive them all and take comfort in the knowledge that there are people out there, besides Clarkson, who will never believe you can have enough power. Although we are calling this group executive, these are not the cars driving far too close to the back of your car in the fast lane. Oh no, this lot are long gone. What started out as a blue-collar thing in the United States of America, putting ridiculously large engines in otherwise ordinary saloon cars, has become a white-collar pursuit in Europe. And nobody does it better than BMW in its motorsports division and Audi with its four-wheel drive RS cars. Those BMWs feature, of course, completely unnecessary V8 engines. The 2003 example M5 had a 5-litre V8, while the more recent 2012 model also has a V8, only this one is smaller and has turbochargers, 2 of them. Likewise, the Audis, the raffish RS5 with its clean air breathing 4.2-litre V8 and the rakish RS7 with its twin turbo V8. The turbos are there to save the planet, apparently.
Welcome to the bloodiest battleground in the world of cars. A fight for supremacy between the very best fast cars of our time. It is a battleground of radically different weapons. Compare, for example, the fastest car General Motors has ever made, the 638 horsepower Corvette ZR1, with the digital masterpiece that offers up more go for your pound, dollar, yen or dirham than anything else on the planet, the Nissan GT-R. Others are subtler, as precise as a surgeon's blade, like the Ferrari 458, which might just be the finest car the Italians have ever made. And then there are cars that are far from perfect, but with that certain something. Like the Lexus LFA, this is for me the most brilliant supercar ever made. If you disagree, you're wrong. Let battle commence. At the turn of the century, Le Mans wasn't just a race you visited to watch Audi repeatedly walk off with the big trophy. It was a race you visited to watch harder, nastier GT versions of fast road cars kicking great lumps out of each other's bodywork. Here then we have some of the finest production cars born of the racetrack. Cars like the Dodge Viper GTS ACR, a car so violent it makes the normal 8-litre V10 powered Viper look timid. Cars like the 360 Challenge Stradale, which packed Ferrari's GT racing know-how into a car you could drive to the shops, as long as you didn't mind arriving at the shops with blood gushing from your ears. Many of these cars should never have been allowed on the public road. They were designed to race, and be warned, they do not suffer fools gladly. Tread carefully and pack fresh undergarments.
Men might not have been men in the 1980s, but the cars we drove, Testarossa, Countach, M1, even the names have enough testosterone to make you forgive the decade that taste forgot. In Europe, king of the hill was the 180-mile-an-hour Ferrari, the 512 TR, the second-generation Testarossa, with its vast air intakes chilling a 5-litre flat 12 engine that seemed to occupy acres of the back of the car, and also the road. Being fastest was, of course, the obsession in the me 1980s, and Lamborghini wasn't lying down. The LP 5000 QV was the final and fastest version of Countach, which started life back in 1974. The BMW M1 and Ferrari GTO, meanwhile, were the fruits of racing projects, though neither really ever got to compete. Sporting regulations were as flighty as fashion in the 1980s.
This is the race you should want to see more than any other. Ferrari F12 versus Lamborghini Aventador versus Aston Martin 177. These are the dream cars of our times, made from stuff that hadn't even been discovered just a few years ago and developed by men with dashing, heroic names like Dario, Valentino and Alan. Each one is V12 powered and capable of things that less than a decade ago would have landed you in a hedge and then in a hospital. They push the boundaries of what we've come to call fast. I would say they're among the fastest cars we'll ever see, but I won't. There will be faster cars one day very soon, remarkable as that might seem. But for now, just enjoy the glorious state of the art. Back when Concorde retired, it felt like the world had run out of ideas and the money needed to keep making planes faster and faster. Well, thankfully, the world's motorcar engineers are made of stronger stuff than their colleagues in aerospace. The end of Concorde seemed to signal the start of a ground-based air race, the era of the hypercar. Take Pagani. The Zonda Cinque was meant to be the last evolution of Horacio Pagani's first attempt at a supercar. It wasn't. We were still pinching ourselves to believe a man with such a ridiculous name could build such a ridiculously brilliant and beautiful car when he came up with another, the even more extraordinary Huayra. And then, of course, there's the new McLaren P1, a 900 horsepower hybrid which might just turn out to be the greatest hypercar of them all. It'll be fun finding out. "200 miles an hour. It's a number that's led us to some of the most astonishing cars ever to grace our roads. The first true 200-mile-an-hour road car was the Ferrari F40. It arrived back in 1987, yet more than a quarter of a century later, it remains the most exhilarating car you'll ever drive. Over the following years, other road cars squeezed into Ferrari's 200-mile-an-hour territory until another F1 team arrived to really raise the bar. The McLaren F1 of 1993 melded a BMW V12 and space-grade materials to achieve a staggering 240 miles an hour. Even 20 years on, only a couple of cars have ever gone faster. All the cars you see here are fully paid-up members of the 200-mile-an-hour club. Just remember to give them the respect that they deserve.
This group brings together cars with a certain kind of credibility, a retro, authentic credibility, burnished with a certain celebrity and a certain authenticity. If you're the kind that's never been seen in anything but an old work shirt and a pair of skinny jeans, then this class is for you. It's Forza for hipsters. Of course, what could be more hip than the original hot hatch, the Volkswagen Rabbit GTI, or as the rest of the world calls it, the Golf. Or for that matter, the Datsun 510, the appealing little Nissan that began to spread the word that Japanese cars were really rather good and possessed a quality undiscovered elsewhere on the planet. reliability. Lastly, and only a hipster would ever love this one, there is a VW Beetle. Here's a simply huge group of cars. This will take you some time, and it will give you some considerable pleasure. You will know all these cars, cars you may well have actually driven. Or, if you're too young to drive, cars you will soon be lusting after. I guarantee that. From early super hatches like the Ford Focus RS to the Mini John Cooper Works, they fall into two groups, fast and really very fast indeed. Finally, there's the Volkswagen Scirocco. VW doesn't like to call it a hatch, but nor is it a coupe either. Still, it would be such a shame to leave it out. Especially as I wrote rather a nice song about the diesel version. I could sing it for you if you like. Here's a little test for you. A bunch of cars with all sorts of different ways of getting you from A to B quickly. Front-wheel drive, that's the way the car business prefers to make its cars. Rear-wheel drive, that's the way you and I would prefer the car business to make cars. Mid-engined and rear-wheel drive, which is the way Lamborghini makes cars, and four-wheel drive, which I'm not sure is the way anyone really wants to make cars, except when it's snowy, of course, which for most of us isn't very often. Four-wheel drive cars are easy and safe. If you drive too fast, they won't spin, usually, but they don't go sideways either, usually. Rear-wheel drive cars will go sideways. It's relatively simple and safe to do so without spinning, relatively. Try them all and tell me I'm wrong. There are many ways to go very fast around a track like ours. You can choose four-wheel drive or rear drive, mid-engined or front-engined, great big V12 or little V8 with a turbocharger. All those options are here in this group. There are two super Mercedes here, the SLR and the SLS, and the car Clarkson says is the best car he's ever driven, probably in the world, the Lexus LFA. But if there is one standout car in this group, it surely has to be the McLaren F1. The only car here where you sit in the middle. The only car made of real gold. The only car that will still silence any group of men as it drives by.
This group demonstrates what engineers can do when they're allowed to go completely mad. There's nothing here you should not experience at least once. Just about every kind and configuration is here. Some have their engines in the middle, some at the front, some have rear drive, some send their horsepower to all four corners. All, however, do have one thing in common. They all look as fast as they're supposed to be. Some people say that the Pagani and the Koenigsegg Agera are racing cars with stereos, but that isn't necessarily so. Road cars may be more powerful than racers, but they're often softer and kinder and squidgier. Be in no doubt, this is a very good place to spend rather more time than you should. There are many, many things a road car must do that a race car need not. It needs to keep its driver comfortable and cool, and ideally in an environment in which it's not only possible to listen to the radio, but to hold a conversation as well. It must be able to give its driver every possible opportunity to avoid an accident, and when he runs out of talent and luck, protect him like a mummy polar bear protects her cub. Now, imagine if you could strip out all of those requirements. And that brings us to this, the Ferrari 458 Italia and the latest racing Viper. Very different, but both viciously effective.
Here are some Le Mans cars, most of them winners, not one of them what you would expect. The 2012 Audi R18 e-tron Quattro, a four-wheel drive hybrid, is possibly the most complicated car to win Le Mans yet. Peugeot's first diesel, the twin-turbo V12 908, secured victory over Audi at Le Mans on its third attempt. This car, the number 9, was the winner. Lastly, a bit of a throwback, and it's not actually a Le Mans winner. But the Ferrari 333 SP is here because, well, it's a racing Ferrari with a V12.
If the Stig was given the keys to a car company, these are the cars he would make us drive. You see, a man who senses only how fast or how sideways he's going doesn't care if he's cold or wet or being machine-gunned with insects. You and I do, however. So we'd only consider driving cars like these if the upside was intergalactic joy. These are the cars that represent the mantra of Lotus founder Colin Chapman, who said, "Simplify and add lightness." Lotus themselves have never forgotten this, which is why they came up with the remarkable 211. It's based on the Elisa's, most Lotuses have been for years, but it does without frivolous things, like a windscreen, all in the name of saving weight. You won't find a screen on the KTM Crossbow either. Being made by sensible Austrians, they do offer one as an option, but it looks silly, and worse still, it adds weight. So forget that, and just enjoy the car. There are fast cars, there are very fast cars, and there are very, very fast cars. And then there are cars for which whole new words are needed. Cars like the Ariel Atom V8. When I first drove the original Atom, I didn't believe that the human senses or face could survive any more of a pounding. Clearly, however, the chaps who work in Ariel's top-secret shed in the English countryside thought I was wrong. Which is why, a couple of years ago, Ariel decided it would be a great idea to remove the supercharged 275 horsepower Honda engine from the Atom and replace it with a 500 horsepower V8. Lightweight track day specials simply don't get more extreme than this. Captain Slow still hasn't recovered from driving it, but are you made of stronger stuff?
A long time ago, on a stretch of greasy tarmac far, far away, rallying took the battle to the F1 empire with a new kind of weapon, light years more powerful and faster than anything that had come before. Mid-engined and/or four-wheel drive, turbocharged and sometimes supercharged too. The story starts with the Lancia 037, a mid-engined rear-drive supercar built not for the track, but for snow and ice and gravel and mud. Not so the 500 brake horsepower Lancia Delta S4 and the Ford RS200. The Lancia took a silhouette from the production line. Ford didn't even bother making the car look like a production car. The highly experimental RS200's engine was in the back, but for balance, its transmission in the front. From the teams that owned rallying in the 70s and 80s, you choose, but may the forced induction be with you.
We like trucks on Top Gear. First we tried to kill one, and then, when we couldn't, we took it to the North Pole. And it got us there safely. Never broke down once, except when Jeremy crashed it, because he's a moron. Anyway, trucks of course mean different things to different people. We call the pickup that took us to the pole a truck, while Americans call a Range Rover a truck. We call it the best car in the world, ever. Especially this one, the very latest all-aluminium supercharged V8. Here is a car that will do anything you ever ask of it. The Jeep Cherokee SR-T8 is an American attempt to create a kind of hot rod Range Rover for people who love buying petrol, lots of it. Americans have been making cars like this for a long time. The GMC Cyclone is our kind of truck, a pickup, only with a turbocharged V6 and four-wheel drive. That means it can reach 60 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds.
It takes a man of a certain age to remember that every racing car that makes us fizz today usually has a grandparent that was pounding around a racetrack somewhere in the distant past. This little group features some of the best from the 60s and 70s and later, yet the names are familiar. BMW, Alfa Romeo, Nissan Skyline. When it's in the blood, it's in the blood. Long before the BMW M3, for example, there was the 2002 Turbo. And long before today's Nissan GTR, there was the original Skyline GTR. And as long as there have been cars in Italy, Italians have been racing them. The Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA was a kind of Italian M3 of its day and could be found everywhere on racetracks around the world in the 1960s. With its lightweight aluminium body, it's a very lovely thing. So in danger of sounding like a parent making you listen to their music, I suggest you give this lot a go. The new stuff is not always the best stuff. GT this and GT that. Everything is a GT these days. Only they're not. GT, it stands for Grand Tourer, or it did. It described the kind of a car a man of means and with time on his hands could drive to wherever he wanted in the world, and always with an exceedingly attractive lady in the passenger seat. These are some of the very best. Close your eyes and you can see the Mediterranean glinting down below. Hear some gentle jazz playing in the background. Was there ever a more beautiful GT than the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing? Well, yeah, there probably was, the E-Type Jaguar, but the Gullwing is more famous. And was there ever a more famous man of means than James Bond? Here's your chance to drive an Aston Martin DB5. We have the cars, you have the time. So off you go and rediscover Grand Touring. Say hello to Saint-Tropez from me. Everything is an icon these days. Phones, fridges, football players, but these cars really are. Remarkably, one man, the much-missed Carroll Shelby, had a hand in 3 of them. Shelby had won Le Mans and beaten Ferrari in an Aston Martin, but wanted to win in his own car. The Cobra, a shotgun marriage of a European AC chassis and American Ford V8 muscle, was his first attempt. But the GTO was faster, especially in a straight line. Something purpose-built, money-no-object was needed, and Ford gave Shelby its checkbook. The GT40, created exclusively with the purpose of beating Ferrari at Le Mans, was the result. And beat Ferrari it did in 1966, in 1967, in 1968 and in 1969. Ferrari had won the previous 6 races. It hasn't won at Le Mans since.
Yes. Now somehow a Beetle has got in here. But don't let that put you off. In this little gang from the 60s and 70s, there's also a Lotus Elan Sprint. Old Lotuses remind us that it really is not so complicated to make a car good to drive. Just make it as light as possible and as powerful as is reasonable. Make it have just a little less grip than it actually needs, and, most importantly, make sure the steering wheel is connected directly to the front wheels. No hydraulics, absolutely no electronics. Likewise, if the only Mini you've ever driven in the real world is the comparatively huge car BMW makes today, here's your chance to experience what a team of slightly bonkers Englishmen had in mind when they invented the extremely compact original Mini. Smaller sometimes is better.
Dust off your work shirt, pull on some aviators, call up your girl. Time to go racing in the street. Here, in all their late 60s glory, are the icons of the American muscle car era. There's nothing not to like about cars like these. So what story are you going to write today, and where to start? Back in 1968, with the Hearst performance-fettled Oldsmobile Cutlass, or in psychedelic 1969, when the hippies were welcoming the age of Aquarius, but the rest of us were more interested in the 366 bhp Pontiac GTO Judge. By 1970, the muscle car era was drawing to a close. Time for one last hurrah in the minds of muscle car engineers, hence the 454 cubic inches V8 in the Chevelle SS. Before you reach for your calculator app, yep, that's 7.4 litres. So what are you waiting for? Just pretend it's Friday and the bell's just rung. You might want to turn the volume up for this lot. A whole paddock of racing pony cars with big engines and even bigger names from the American Trans Am scene from the late 1960s. Actually, there's one that snuck in that never raced, but the 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am did star in Smokey and the Bandit. And if it's good enough for Burt Reynolds, it's good enough for us. Burt's Firebird's two predecessors, the 69 and the 73, did compete. The latter with a 7.5-litre V8. Not that such a huge engine was any guarantee of success. If you want to race a winner, try the Boss Mustang and the AMC Javelin, all Trans Am champions in one form or another. Lastly, the car with the very bestest name here, the 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator. If you're here looking for delicately balanced namby-pamby European sports cars, you are in the wrong place. If you've ever been to Le Mans, you'll know that the real racing goes on behind the one-off prototypes, where extreme versions of the same supercars you see parked in the paddock go wheel to wheel out on the circuit. This is GT racing, where if you've got the money, you can make all your racing driver fantasies come true. You don't even have to be fast. If you can afford one of these cars, you can afford to pay a professional driver to do all the hard work and just turn up on the podium. But where's the fun in that? There are GT series all over the world, and slowly all the regulations are coming together. But that needn't bother you with this group. The BMW M3 GT2 was first designed to race in the US, but has raced with considerable success all over the world. Corvette Racing, meanwhile, is the most successful team ever in the American Le Mans series and has taken its racers and the GT battle successfully to Le Mans.
There are sports cars and there are sports cars. Some of us will be lucky enough to drive a sports car, but only a very few ever get to drive a sports car. A one-off creation designed exclusively to race and to win. The modern sports car is a closed-wheel take on a single-seater, built around the same structures with the same obsessive attention to aerodynamic detail, to braking performance, to squeezing every last fraction of a second from the regulations. The driver is strapped to a cockpit that would notionally fit someone else, but never does. Sometimes the cockpit is open, sometimes it's not. The view outside from inside a helmet, don't forget, is limited. Invariably, the job in hand is to race the car at speeds approaching 190 miles an hour, inches from another car, and often for hours at a time. If you thought sports cars were about top-down cruising in the sunshine, it's time you introduced yourself to some sports cars.
Nothing comes close to a single-seater. Nothing accelerates like one. Nothing brakes like one. Nothing goes around corners like one. Take the Dallara DW12, the one and only car drivers race in the IndyCar Series, America's ultimate single-seater championship, and its jewel in the crown, the Indy 500, the world's fastest and most famous race. The DW in the name is a tribute to Dan Wheldon, a British driver and Indy 500 winner who lost his life racing one of the DW12's fully open-wheeled predecessors. If the Dallara looks unlike any other single-seater you've ever seen, then you'll need to understand its aerodynamics are designed to keep the cars safe and stable on the 230-mile-an-hour plus banked ovals that many of the series races take part on. The only option for teams is the supply of turbocharged 2.2-litre V6 engines from either Chevrolet or Honda.
V8 supercars. Big, loud, basic, Australian. And unless you lead some kind of alternative lifestyle, they only come in two types. A Holden, that's like a Chevrolet or an Opel or a Vauxhall, or a Ford, that's like a Ford. It's a simple choice, steak or prawns, mate. Why make life complicated when the sun is shining and the racing is this good? Australia doesn't export its cars, and its domestic racing series is as unique as Aussie rules. The cars are based on the production body shells of the big Holden, the Commodore, or the big Ford, the Falcon, with roll cages. The engines are 600 brake horsepower V8s that have made the trip from America. Not surprisingly, and just like Aussie rules, it's a sport for real men. Think NASCAR drivers, then dial out the sophistication. But beware, the fans are as tough as the drivers. They're either Holden or Ford.
For those of us of a certain age, 1976 will always be remembered as the most dramatic Grand Prix season ever. Nothing before or since has come close. Two big personalities, British playboy James Hunt and steely Austrian Niki Lauda, went head-to-head in 16 races, in the law courts, and in Lauda's case, via an intensive care ward in Germany. There was, of course, a whole grid of cars battling for the championship in 76, but the Ferrari of Lauda and the McLaren of Hunt were the two that mattered most. The flat 12-engined Ferrari carried reigning world champion Lauda into an early season lead before a fiery crash at the Nürburgring left him badly burned and so close to death he was given the last rites. 6 weeks later, though, he was back, still bandaged and still bleeding. It would all come down to a single race in Japan, and a result that nobody could have predicted. Grand Prix racing, the pinnacle of automotive technology. A world of impossible speed and mind-boggling forces. A world where engineers with enormous brains devise new and exciting ways to deceive physics and rule-makers. Where the difference between success and pitiful failure is measured in millimeters and microseconds. A world of fiendishly complicated machines driven by men with superhuman reactions. But the thing about these superhuman drivers is that they